All neighborhoods go through changes, but the transformation of the South End over the last 50 years calls out for special treatment. It's a story with many layers, new versus old, rich versus poor, good and evil. Plus, there's a sense of how it feels to live in a neighborhood. Our guest has covered this territory before in a book called South End Character. This time she's telling a different story, South End Change as a whodunit. The book's called Sitting Ducks. We'd like to welcome the author and longtime South End resident, Alison Barnet. Thank you very much for being with us, Alison. First of all, talk about this title. Who are the Sitting Ducks?
Well, I'm one. Just about all of us in one way or another, unless you have enough money to not have to worry about what happens to you.
But this is a book set in the 1960s, maybe early 1970s, right, yeah. And you know, the South End was noticeably on the way to gentrification at the time, but it was also different. In some ways, it was kind of like the Wild West with some of these speculators and the gold rush, really. Yeah.
And that started happening around 1970. See, my own landlady was attacked in the house. This is sort of the impetus for this story. I don't think anybody was trying to get the house or anything like that, but she was attacked, and we never found out what happened, really.
Now, this is a book about multiple owners
right.
of brownstones,
right,
elderly
right.
women, and did that actually happen, something like that?
Well, I say that it's a metaphor for what was, like you say, the Wild West, all the things that started happening around that time. I don't know for a fact of any elderly person being beaten up, but it's possible.
Now, what I find really intriguing in this book is not so much the materials of the house as much as the people inside the combination. It's not exactly an SRO, single room occupancy, and it's not exactly assisted living, but in some ways it was a little like all of that.
In my house.
Yes.
Right, right.
Walk us through it a bit. What was it like up there?
Well, it was a very special time for me. I mean, here I was, just a young woman who took this apartment, and here were these incredibly interesting people in my house. I mean, very eccentric, and we used to go every night, some of us, not all of us, down to sit with the landlady and watch TV with her, and sometimes eat with her. And it was a real family.
And you know, maybe not like a nuclear family, but on the other hand, you did look out for each other. You
yes.
did important things. Somebody had to walk the dog.
Right, right.
What was that?
And I always remember there was a woman named Lucy. I think Lucy was demented, but at the time I didn't know that. But you'd find her coming home with a heavy bag of potatoes, and she really had trouble getting them upstairs to her third floor apartment. You know, so I'd help her up with the potatoes, and then she would say, this is something people used to say, I'll remember you, you know, like next week when I get my Social Security check. So that's okay, Lucy, it's fine, you know.
Well, this is good guys and good women versus bad women and kind of book. I want to get into the bad side of this because, you know, nowadays in the South End, it seems self-evident that everything's worth a lot of money. Most of the places are well taken care of. But back, at least up through the early 1970s, there was a way of, I guess, reinforcing that perception, trying to make it current. It got kind of heavy-handed.
Which perception?
Well, the perception that this is a place where you could make tons of money if you...
welcome, come on in.
Right.
Yeah, right.
There was some very, almost strong-arming tactics being used.
Yes, I think there probably were. We don't really know for sure about most of them. But there were all those things like about the 312 loans that went to white middle-class people who were new to the neighborhood. You know, they really weren't meant for the middle class. Betty Gibson, realtor, got a hefty one herself. I forget what the amount was, but it was high. You know, this is... Yeah.
But what was also going on is that you had people in the neighborhood who were trying to either stop this or make sure that the benefits were better distributed. And you know, we have people like Mel King, we know his story, but you also had some characters who were putting out a newspaper. Tell me a little bit about that. Right.
Also, I was thinking just today about Doug Zook and Michael Lerner. They were radicals who did put out that newspaper. And Doug used to talk about the brass doorknob set coming into the South End. I'd forgotten that expression, but it's great. Now, of course, we don't have brass doorknobs at all. But anyway, yeah, the newspaper, that's based on the People's South End News, which started attacking, really, various new developers who were coming in and owned lots of properties.
Well, anyhow, you've got this newspaper. You got people who are trying to stop the speculators from making a killing, and I guess this leads to a confrontation support of sorts. So tell me a little bit about that, but don't give away too much. But tell me what that means in your story.
What means?
In other words, when you have the people putting out the paper trying to stop the speculators, that leads to some pretty strong conflict.
Yes, but nobody was killed or anything like that.
Not in real life.
Not in real life, no. At one time, the South End Historical Society had its ball, its annual ball at the Cyclorama, and we had a demonstration there. I went to that myself.
What did you think of it?
I loved it. I mean, I didn't love the ball, but we watched as certain people, those new developers, walked in with their wives or whatever, you know, and we jeered them. But some of them went in the back way, and we didn't get the satisfaction.
But go ahead. Tell us.
No, I was just trying to think what the name, what we had on the. There was one poster that I really liked. It showed a champagne glass with a fire in it, and I forget what the phrase was, but.
One of the things I was thinking of when I read the book, you have a character who clearly makes me think of you, and she's thinking some years later about the owner of the house where you lived, that you'd never taken a picture of her before, and you really regretted that.
Or any of the people in the house. Not Sammy, none of them.
Sammy, the
dog, the
right,
collie.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I just didn't have a camera, and I wasn't even thinking about it.
Right. But going back in the book here, Roxanne, who's the character like you, she seems to have these journal entries. Were you doing that back in the early 70s?
Yes, I was. And in fact, in my apartment, I had 2 refrigerators, one that worked and one that was broken, and I used to hide my journal in the broken refrigerator. I was so afraid of fire, you know.
Why do you think you were keeping those notes? I mean,
that's
writing them down.
How I am. You know, I was a writer even then. Right. I'd go down and sit there with my landlady watching TV or whatever, and then I would go upstairs and try to copy down what was said.
But you must have been thinking too that even at that time that this is how things are now, and there's going to be a day when things are going to be so much different.
I don't know if I thought that. I don't know. I just found it very amusing, you know, many of the things, particularly that Lucy, the one who I think was probably demented, some of the things she said. I mean, it was just a riot.
You have another character in the book who is sort of the co-detective, Andrea.
Yes,
Tell me a little bit about her.
Right. Andrea, people think that every character in that book is based on a real character. Most of them are in one way or another. Not 100%, but Andrea is not really. Andrea is a type. Somebody who had gone to Radcliffe, black woman gone to Radcliffe, who was, you know, something like Angela Davis, looked even like her, and, you know, was a radical.
Now, one strange thing, this is the real gossip part of the novel here.
I wish you hadn't read it.
You know, I know there are good people and bad people. We have a narrator who's supposed to be one of the good people, but she's very embedded with the bad people, so it seems.
Yeah, but that was how it was in 1970. It was. I mean, we used to sit out on the stoop, and if somebody kind of attractive walked by, next thing you know, we are embedded. Right, that kind of thing, and not without thinking it through.
Well, the other thing here is a sense of how you know you're in the neighborhood. And I know you wonderfully described the building you're in and the people in it, and then there's this fire one night, and people go out in the street.
Right, in
Tell
their
us
bathrobes.
what that was like.
There were a lot of fires back then. In fact, I used to keep anything that was valuable right near my bed, and shoes and a coat or whatever, because it happened quite often. But that particular one was three doors down. I think about this all the time, because even though they fixed the place up, they didn't do a good job of it. You know, I mean, there's something different about the doorway of that house because it was such a bad fire. And my policeman friend down the block was the hero of that fire. He caught a baby, or more than one, being thrown out the top windows. But it was always, you know, we met people out there too. I mean, we're all out there in our bathrobes.
And they knew everything that was going on.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
absolutely. That's the neighborhood. Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, thank you.
Alison Barnet, and the book's called Sitting Ducks. We'll have more news in just a moment.